Hello, everyone, or anyone. It's Gordon Causey, as always, coming live and completely unscripted on this, the 30th of December to 2023. Candy the Wonder Pup has shown up for her usual. She's already handing me her paw because she wants her treat, bacon treat. Ho ho, you want that? Okay, give me a paw. Lay down, lay down. Speak, speak. Give me a good one. Speak. All right, I'll accept that. And that takes care of Candy. As always, thank you for the likes, for the thumbs up, and for subscriptions. This miserable, pathetic, unmonetized YouTube channel where I try and inject my voice into the public discourse. And tonight I'm going back to an old topic, masking. It's being widely reported that cases of COVID are rising. There's a new variant. I forget which one. It's an alphabet soup of variants out there. Last one I took note of was XBB.1.5 or whatever it was called. And COVID, whatever the variants are, they're said to be subvariants of a Omicron was said to be a variant, and now we have variants of the variant. And because with cases on the rise, I have seen in my own personal experience an increase in the number of people wearing a mask. A little background on me: up until June of 2021, I was in the Canadian Armed Forces in the communications branch. Then I retired from the military June of 2021. And in May of 2022, I started working in a large retail establishment. Got to do something. And when I'm at work, I interact and am around a lot of people. And I have seen in the last week or so a distinct increase, perceptible increase to my eyes in the number of people wearing a mask. Now, and in their eyes, I see fear. I see concern. I see worry. But I myself do not wear a mask. Never. And my dog, she's always got to find something to play around with that makes noise. Candy, go lay down. Sit, lay down, stay. Hopefully that works. Just chill out. Anyway, when I encounter someone wearing a mask, I am as friendly and as engaging with them as I am with those who don't wear masks. I genuinely feel a degree of empathy because I know that these people are scared. The masking behavior I see runs the gamut. You have everything from the tight-fitting N95 type that appears, for the most part, a lot of the time appears to be very tightly sealed. But then I still see these cloth designer masks, the one with the sparklies on it or a pattern, more of a fashion statement than medical PPE. This is medical grade. Masks are, by definition, medical grade PPE, personal protective equipment. They're not safety shoes. Safety shoes, safety goggles, things of this nature. These are not medical grade PPE. But when you talk about things like masks, gowns, and gloves, these are medical grade PPE. And one thing I'm noticing, and the reason I put, you never wear a mask, don't you believe in science? Is that's what I see in people's eyes. They would like to see everyone wearing a mask, and this attitude manifests itself far more overtly in the digital sphere and social media on sites like Twitter, which is now referred to as X. People are much more bold in expressing their views on a platform like Twitter than they would be in person to person. No one challenges me over not wearing a mask in public, but I imagine that that same individual, if they have a Twitter or an Instagram or a Facebook account, and especially though Twitter and Instagram, where so often it's usernames and people don't know who the person is. Facebook, a lot of the time you're dealing with people, it's their personal page, it's their name, you know who they are. But when it's an anonymous type platform, it's like, why isn't everyone wearing a mask? COVID's on the rise. It isn't over. Oh my God, you're so stupid. Don't you believe in science? And I find this incredibly problematic because science has become a religion. Science is not something, in my view, that you believe in. Science is a process. Science is an investigative human endeavor that attempts to discover truths. And I find what people now want to do with science is they want to skip over everything and they want to get right to the end result and they want to know what the truth is. And they think you can take a shortcut and arrive right at the truth without having to worry about anything else. And that's dangerous. And it leads to the world that we live in now, where we have an individual like Anthony Fauci, head of the CDC. No, he's not. He's head of the NIH, National Institutes of Health, or at least he was, declaring to the world that I am the science. I mean, there's a religious aspect to that type of proclamation. It is similar to the Pope and this whole idea of papal infallibility. And I find that a lot of people are approaching science the way that some who are deeply religious approach their faith. You have a lot of people who go to church every single Sunday. They've never read a page in the Bible or very little of the Bible. And they say, well, it's too much for me to understand. But this priest went to seminary and they have this hierarchical structure and they have a pope and the pope talks to God and then they tell me and I've been removed from the equation. They can tell me what the truth is. And we're taking the same dynamic and we're applying it to the realm of science. And that scares the heck out of me. Because people tend to view, if you stick the term scientific truth on something, a lot of things that are determined to be scientific truth are later determined to be false. In a prime example would be late 2020, early 2021, when the COVID vaccines first came out, and it was proclaimed by the Anthony Fauci types, him and others, of his ilk, declared that we now know enough. We've done enough research and enough studies to know that the COVID vaccines will provide long-lasting sterilizing immunity to infection and that they're incredibly effective. If you get 2 shots, you do not get COVID. And you were allowed to say that. If you didn't say that, you were deemed as spreading false information. Now, anyone who's got a functioning brain and can read basic literacy skills knows that turned out to be completely false. There's no sterilizing immunity to infection. And all you have to do is talk to people. Have you had your jabs? Have you had COVID? Yeah. Yes. Repeatedly, you hear about people getting sick with COVID despite having 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think this most recent shot that just became available October-ish in my country, Canada, they're getting it over and over and over again. Well, it would have been worse. It would have been worse if I hadn't had the shots. Cause and effect rationale. But I got to get back to masks. a study was done, McMaster University. This is the difficult aspect with this whole conversation, is that people have rushed to the end and they just want to know, do masks work? And they've been told by some authoritative source, like a newspaper article, CBC, and it says, McMaster University declares that masks are an effective tool to combat viral spread. And then, I know all I need to know. That news did come out over, would have been 2022, I think it was in 2022, might have been 2021 even. McMaster University, which is one of Canada's leading medical schools, they undertook to review over 100 years worth of masking studies and research. And it's called a meta-analysis. Look at everything. Look at lab experiments, look at real world trials, look at all the data, and they looked at over 100 years worth. And their concluding statement was this: while there is no direct evidence showing that masks provide any benefit, either for the person wearing them or for others, we suggest that the possibility of a modest reduction likely outweighs the potential for harm. And you can look that up. It was published to the Annals of Internal Medicine. And I don't have an issue with that statement because they presented the facts. They had reviewed 100 years worth of studies and they found no direct evidence showing any benefit, either for the person wearing it, that's personal protection, or for others, so-called source control. However, they suggested that there was still the possibility of a modest reduction in viral transmission. That second part is a value statement, and I don't have an issue with it. I don't have an issue with someone saying that while the evidence doesn't show it, doesn't mean they don't work. It just means that it's unproven. And so, but what I did take an issue with was that outfits like CBC, our horrible state-owned media company in Canada, they came out with articles saying that McMaster University declares that masks are a proven effective tool against at mitigating viral spread. And that's not what McMaster concluded. They concluded that there was no direct evidence showing any benefit, either for the person wearing them or for others. However, they had an opinion, the authors of the paper had an opinion that they thought that there was still the possibility of a modest reduction in viral spread. And so, and that possible reduction, that it outweighed the potential harms. That was their opinion. Could they prove it? No. And this is where we get into this, people rushing to the end. They just want to get to the end. They want to know, are masks good or are masks bad? There was one single study done after that McMaster meta-analysis within a year. A study was done. Actually, there were two studies. One was in Denmark. It involved 3 universities and a hospital from Denmark. And they did, at that time, it was the largest ever masking trial, and their results corroborated everything that had gone before and their conclusions. And again, their study was also published to the Annals of Internal Medicine, peer-reviewed scientific journal, that there was no statistically significant difference between the masked arm and the unmasked arm. People still believed it, even though it wasn't proven, and that's fair enough. People are allowed to believe something even though it's not proven. Absence of evidence does not necessarily mean evidence of absence. Just because you haven't found something doesn't mean it's not there. There might be a benefit. Then subsequent to that study in Denmark, another study was done in Bangladesh. And the one in Bangladesh, going off memory, also published to the Annals of Internal Medicine, incidentally. They went to a third world country, and their trial involved, I believe, in the neighborhood of 250,000 participants. And their study found a very modest reduction in viral transmission, that the masked arm did marginally but statistically significant, but very small. It showed a benefit. And for a lot of people, they said, Bob's your uncle. There you go. We finally have it. There, proof. That is proof. And again, this shows a woeful ignorance of science, because one of the key elements when trying to establish scientific truth is, and the word is called, replication. Just because one study provides an indication of something, it's just one study. We have 100 years worth of studies showing no benefit, and then one comes along and it shows a benefit. Modest or otherwise, it showed a benefit. Does that then wipe out the previous 100 years? This is where replication comes in, because every study done, invariably, if you read through the peer reviews, the people in that field who then review the material, and they, in their peer review, will cite the limitations of the study, the potential for bias, the holes, if you will, in the methodology. And typically in a lot of studies there are. And most studies you will read will say in conclusion that further studies need to be conducted to confirm these results. That's replication. But no study has been done since then. It's like, we've got the answer we wanted, we're stopping. And that's not how science works. Science just keeps evolving. My concern with masking, and I do not profess to be an expert in any way, shape, or form, but that I'm not going to sell myself short and say that I'm completely bereft of experience with medical grade PPE, because one of the units to which I was posted to a medical unit, a field ambulance unit. And if anyone has watched the TV show MASH, you'll know that there are episodes of, I know it's fiction, but there are episodes of that show where Radar, where Father Mulcahy, Klinger, non-medical staff have to assist in dealing with triage, or at least with moving patients, taking them into the OR, things of that nature. Communications branch was also shown in the military how the proper donning and doffing procedures for medical grade PPE, donning, putting on, doffing, taking off. If you're in a compromised environment, if you're in an environment where you have a mask that's on your face, potentially contaminated with a viral pathogen like a SARS-CoV-2 or any other, and goodness knows there are bacteria out in the world right now that are drug resistant. We have streptococcus. We have incredibly virulent pathogens out there beyond just SARS-CoV-2 and other viruses, RSV and influenza. There are germs, pathogens, microbes. Germs are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. And the outside of the mask is potentially contaminated. And I would invite anyone to go onto the World Health Organization's own website and look at their do's and don'ts for masking, how to properly wear and handle a mask. Because the outside material is potentially contaminated with viral pathogens and goodness knows what else, you are never to touch the outside of the mask. And if you do, each time the mask is touched, you're to clean your hands, either wash them or use an alcohol-based sanitizer. Why? Why do you do that? For the same reasons that in an OR setting, they gown up, they put on their gown and their glove and their mask and everything, and they walk into the OR and they're like this. If someone scratches their nose or paws at their face, they have to go scrub up again because they're no longer sterile. This is, people will talk to you and they'll say, well, they wear masks in an OR. Yes, they do. But they don't go, before going into OR, just pull a mask out of their dirty pocket, put it on their face, and say, okay, I'm going into the OR now, and then pull it back up over their face. No, they have to handle it in a sterile fashion. And again, don't listen to me, Gordon Causey, Joe Nobody, on a pathetic little YouTube channel. Go to the World Health Organization. You're on the internet. You have access to the world's greatest, bigger than any university library you're ever going to want to come across. You can research everything from multiple reputable sources. You can go to Yale, to Harvard, to the Mayo Clinic. You can get this information from the World Health Organization. You can source this from multiple academic institutions, government organizations, NGOs. You can read up and inform yourself. People take more care in informing themselves about the purchase of a vehicle than they do about health decisions, which is mind-blowing. We default, blind trust. Someone says, I am the science, and then proceeds to lie and says that the SARS-CoV-2 virus originated in a wet market in Wuhan, China, when a bat interacted with a human being, bit or scratched or clawed him, and the virus jumped from a bat to a human. And that was the only accepted story as per the science. And yet, now that fact has been thoroughly debunked by virtue of multiple studies across multiple bat populations looking for the source, the origin, the bat population that had this supposed bat virus, and has completely come up empty, zero, no evidence whatsoever. And now they're saying, well, maybe it came from like a raccoon type fox or some other mammalian species. We don't know. I happen to agree with Dr. James Redfield, former head of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States of America. Dr. Redfield was shut out by Dr. Fauci because Dr. Redfield did not go along with this fiction story of bat to human transmission. Dr. Redfield, as an actual virologist, someone who studies viruses, Anthony Fauci, his field of expertise is immunology, a study of the human immune system, or of the immune systems in general, I would imagine, not just human, but likely human is where he has his greatest expertise. But that's his field of expertise. Dr. Redfield is a virologist and head of the CDC. He's the one who studies actual viruses themselves, not the immune system that they interact with. And in looking at the SARS-CoV-2 virus, Dr. Redfield expressed the expert opinion that the SARS-CoV-2 virus showed all the markings of a man-made virus, of something that had been manipulated in a lab-type setting, and he wasn't the only one. Dr. Luc Montagnier, who was a Nobel Prize winner, he and his team, he led a team in France that discovered or isolated HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, the virus which causes AIDS. His discovery or isolation of that virus led to he and his team. I'm not sure. I know he received the Nobel Prize. I don't know if his team did or not. Doesn't matter. You can look it up. Luc Montagnier. It's French. Not even sure how you spell Montagnier. But he expressed the same opinion. And immediately, because he was contradicting Pope Anthony Fauci, he was slandered, deplatformed, censored, and accused of spreading misinformation. He was spreading truth, his version of the truth. It contradicted. Now, when if Anthony Fauci had said, it's my opinion, however, I have no evidence, no proof to back it up, but it's my opinion that it likely came from a wet market in Wuhan, China, well, that's one thing, but he didn't say that. He was actively engaged in he wanted one narrative. But bringing it back to masks, as I like to go off in all these different tangents, and I apologize for that, but that's part of my nature. My brain takes me in different directions, and I just go down those rabbit holes sometimes. But if you're going to wear a mask, N95, tightly sealed to the face, you cannot have a beard. I'm sorry. If you want to wear a mask, you've got to shave the beard. And it has to be tightly sealed to the face every time you touch the mask. So before you put the mask on, wash your hands, clean your hands, sanitize, however you want to do it. Put the mask on, only holding it by the loops, not touching the outside material. Then pinch it to the nose, ensure that it's tightly sealed around the face, and then once it's on, then wash, clean, sanitize your hands again, and then don't touch the mask. And when you take it off, by the loops again, dispose of it or put in a bag of some sort, and then immediately after removing it, then sanitize again. And the reason we do this, everyone should have learned this in grade 7 and 8 health class. It's called cross-contamination. Every time you touch your face, and that includes the mask, which is a petri dish on your face, it's wet, it's warm, it's an ideal breeding ground for germs, bacteria, viral pathogens. Blah. It's ideal for it. It's a petri dish. So every time you touch that mask, and you see people doing this all the time, oh, my nose itches. So they pull it down, scratch their nose, pull it back up, don't wash their hands. Or they engage in conversation and they pull it down because they want to show the full expression of their face, or perhaps their words are getting garbled up by this face diaper. So they pull it down, convey the information they want, and then they pull it back up and they don't wash their hands. Now they go, if they're in a store type setting, they go and oh, I don't want that apple. I don't want that one. And they start touching everything. And this is what is referred to as cross-contamination. Then someone else comes up, grabs that same apple. Now they potentially have that individual's the gunk that was on their mask. Who knows? It could be a streptococcus. Flesh-eating disease is in the strep family. They touched that apple, that loaf of bread, whatever, that product, that door handle, that gas pump. Common touch surfaces are all over the place. And all they have to do is just a little wipe of the eye, and which is something people do without even thinking about it. It's a subconscious behavior. People do it all the time. And now it's the person wearing the mask who is contributing to viral spread, not the non-mask wearer. Unfortunately, and the saddest part about all this is the fact that even before SARS-CoV-2 came along, we had streptococcus. We had this flesh-eating disease. We have germ-resistant bacteria. We have, antibiotic-resistant bacteria or drug-resistant bacteria. You'll remember that, most should remember, that for a long time, people were saying that the widespread use of sanitizer and our hyper cleansing of surfaces and everything like this, that it was actually leading to the inevitable creation of a super bug that would be completely resistant, and that would be any antibacterial, antibiotic drugs, that they wouldn't work on it, because these are life forms and they evolve and they adapt and overcome. And so sadly, even before SARS-CoV-2 came onto the scene, even before COVID, there were deadly pathogens around. RSV can be deadly. Influenza can be deadly. I'm going off of memory here, but I think it was 2018 or 19, 8,950 something, somewhere close to 9,000 Canadians in 1 year died from influenza. And that was without testing basically everything that moves and then counting every positive test as a positive case, and then further counting everyone who died with a positive test as a COVID death. That's what the way it worked with COVID. If you tested positive and then died, well, you were counted into the COVID column. Even if you were hit by a bus, Toronto Public Health tweeted that any death that comes with a positive test is counted in with the COVID deaths, even if COVID wasn't the cause of death. And we saw this famously, I haven't talked about it for a while, but October of 2021, the province of Alberta blamed the death of a 14-year-old on COVID. His name was Nathaniel Spitzer or Spitzer, S-P-I-T-Z-E-R or S-P-I-T-Z-E-R. This still bugs me that they blamed COVID. They did a press conference. Dina Hinshaw, the chief medical officer of health for the province of Alberta, press conference. We just had our youngest ever COVID death in the province of Alberta, a 14-year-old. He had he had underlying health issues, but this was a COVID death. And then later we found out, because of that kid's family members, two sisters, went to an alternative media outlet called the Western Standard, and because they complained to Alberta Health Services, they ignored them. They went to the CBC, CTV Global, the mainstream, they ignored them. So they went to an alternative outlet called the Western Standard, and they said, our brother did not die of COVID. He had terminal stage 4 inoperable brain cancer, and he was in palliative care. He was receiving end-of-life care, keeping him as comfortable as he could. And 2 days before his fully expected and tragic death, these bastards subjected this child to a PCR test, a nasal colonoscopy, so that when it came up positive, they could blame COVID for a death that was fully anticipated. And that is disgusting. And Dina Hinshaw should have been fired on the spot. But in terms of masks, I can respect someone if they wear it as medical grade PPE. I don't agree with them, but at least, hey, maybe there's a benefit. And you're wearing it properly, you're handling it properly, you're treating it as medical grade PPE and wearing and handling it in a sterile fashion. Okay, fair enough. I'm not willing to do that. It is incredibly involved. Every time you touch the mask, you have to sanitize your hands. Wash, clean, sanitize. Every time you touch it. When you put it on, when you take it off, and anytime you touch it in between. And nobody does that. Certainly not the ones wearing the designer masks, the ones with the sparklies and the floral patterns and everything else. That's just ignorance on steroids. And that's just virtue signaling. That's just, oh, look at me, I'm a good person. No, you're not. That's the end of my video. Thank you for watching. It's now the 31st. It's now New Year's Eve. So in 24 hours, it'll be a new year, 2024. And I might do one tomorrow night. I've got a few ideas rattling around in my head about things I want to talk about, more about the war in Israel, more about what's been happening lately in Ukraine. The war that we were told, oh, Ukraine's kicking Russia's backside, this war is going to be over soon. Just a little bit more. It's going to be dragging on for another year. The war that never ends. Also talk about the surging number of, I guess they're calling them migrants now, coming into the U.S. through the southern border, that Texas has been putting onto buses and shipping to cities like Chicago and New York because they can't handle them. And now cities like New York and Chicago are saying we can't handle it either. Everything we've seen happen, from COVID to these so-called climate disasters, to the war between Ukraine and Russia, the war that's going on between Israel and Hamas, all of this, it's all part and parcel. I wrap it all up into this great reset agenda. And ultimately what I see coming is they want to move this world. It's globalization. They want to eliminate national borders. They want to have one world government. And it's a dehumanizing agenda. We're entering this era of artificial intelligence, biodigital convergence, where the digital world and the biological world, the human world, merge. Cyborgs we're talking about. And the ultimate goal is to have humanity as little more than the digital property of our corporate masters, with government basically there to hold our leash. And a big part of this agenda, overpopulation, is horseshit. Canada, the United States, Western Europe, the Western world contributes nothing, zero, goose egg, to overpopulation. All of the aforementioned countries, all of the Western world has a negative birth rate, meaning that absent immigration, our populations would be in decline, because you need each woman over the course of her lifetime in a population needs to have 2.1 children on average per woman in order for a population just to maintain itself. Anything below that and the population goes down. Anything above that and the population rises. Canada, well, I don't know the exact number. You can look it up if you like, but it's like 1.4 or 1.3. The only country in the Western world with a positive birth rate that's over that 2.1 is Israel. Every other Western nation in the world is below it, where population growth, the reason we've gotten to 8 point whatever billion we are at now, is because of sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, sub-Saharan Africa. That's where the population is growing. So why are we looking at a depopulation agenda that's focusing so much on the Western world? Because they can backfill. As our populations decline, they can backfill the population with people coming from less developed countries, often incredibly well-educated people with university degrees, but their expectations vis-a-vis human rights, standard of living, and more is far less. Sadly, there are people in this world for whom clean water is a luxury. And so notions of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, just give me some clean water. I'm living in paradise now. And makes for a very difficult situation, because as a Christian, as someone who cares about my fellow man, the Bible speaks of welcoming the stranger. And I agree with that principle wholeheartedly. Well, there's a difference. Canada just added 430,000 people in the third quarter of 2023. Over a 3-month period, 430,000 immigrants came into the country. And what that does to a country's culture, its economy, I see it as the erasure of individual autonomous nation states. But anyway, I've gone off on a way different tangent. But again, it's what I like to do. And if you liked it, see, I have 1 thumbs up. Whoever gave it to me, thank you. And anyone else, you're welcome to subscribe. I do these from time to time. I'm trying to branch out more. I tend to be like a dog on a bone, talking about one thing all the time. I did that too much with COVID. I did it too much with the war in Israel. I'm going to try and talk about what's happening in the world, try and inject a sane, rational voice. And if you don't think I'm sane and rational, you're more than welcome to express that opinion in the comment field down below. But if you want to subscribe to my miserable, pathetic channel, it's appreciated. And we will talk to you again in a few nights, maybe even tomorrow. Good night now. God bless.